So it's time. It's time we revisit Monster Hunter World. Why? Because I feel like at this point, it's a game that might be a bit underappreciated now. It's been out for quite a few years now, and with the release of Rise, it's in a funny place right now. So when this game first came out on January 26, 2018, I was ecstatic. But the funny thing was, another favorite game of mine came out the exact same day, and it was Dragon Ball FighterZ. So I had to pretty much choose which game I'd put my most time into first, and then what game I'll put time into after. And of course I picked Monster Hunter because it's been like my main staple series for a couple of years now, actually. Almost 10 years at this point. So I love this franchise, and Monster Hunter World was a big leap for us. Especially if this wasn't your first game, seeing Monster Hunter in HD, in true HD, something that was made for a console that wasn't a handheld. It was pretty, and it still is pretty. Monster Hunter World is a very pretty game. But the thing is, there were some issues that came with this game as well. Now, the game having 16-player hubs was really cool, but just the way the multiplayer was set up, it kind of encouraged anti-socialism. If you weren't playing with friends that you knew personally, then it was kind of boring. I mean, unless you were on a quest, then we have to work together, and we have to somewhat interact. But otherwise, the Gathering Hub was mostly empty if we weren't doing a siege. And I don't know if that was an extreme oversight from Capcom or what, but it seems like it may have been circumvented in Rise, but then Rise is on a smaller scale, so we're just going to have to see what happens with the eventual Monster Hunter 6. And for those that don't know or think they may know, Monster Hunter World is essentially Monster Hunter 5. It is the 5th gen of Monster Hunter and is the main 5th gen game in Monster Hunter. But it seems that Capcom dropped the number system considering how much new people they tried to get into this game, into this franchise, which worked. Now, there's a possibility that this game being called Monster Hunter 5 would have probably thrown a lot of people off, and they wouldn't want to start it because it's Monster Hunter number 5. So if it seems like a clean slate, even if it really isn't, then more people will want to try it and they won't feel left out. They won't feel this sense of FOMO getting into like a 5th game into a series. Now, of course, many of us know that it doesn't matter. These games don't directly connect in terms of overall story, overarching story, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, marketing wise, I think that was the best thing to do. Not only that, but you can clearly see that Capcom has paid close attention to the competition, or at least other live service-esque like games, especially Western games. And it seems like they applied some of that stuff to Monster Hunter, to World, and a lot of it worked. World essentially got weekly quests or weekly bounties, which was pretty cool. I kind of wish we had dailies as well, but I thought the weeklies was pretty cool, and it gave you a reason to hunt monsters you otherwise wouldn't want to hunt. And even though Rise has something like that in a sense, I don't think it's implemented very well, and I kind of think it's, I don't want to say half-assed, but it just doesn't feel as substantial as the weekly bounties in World did. And that's a bit of a shame, to be honest. Now, for a lot of players, especially like me, Monster Hunter World was it was just so fluid. It felt so much more fluid than past games that it was hard for me to go back to past generations of Monster Hunter. Like, just going back to 4U now just feels alien to me now. And I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a testament to how good this game is. It's a testament to how much improved this game is. Now, I know there are also a lot of people who have no trouble going back, but personally, I do. I rely a lot on my own muscle memory, so going backwards, it just feels like regressing for me. At least when it comes to action RPGs like MH, it definitely feels like regressing, and it doesn't feel too great. But if I really wanted to go back to 4U per se and play it, then yeah, I'll put the time back in to relearn everything. But to be honest, I kind of don't right now. It's not something I want to do. I want to keep moving forward. World was also very cinematic. As you can see, this is why I'm using mostly cutscenes in this video, because it was a very cinematic Monster Hunter game. I wouldn't say it's a very cinematic game overall, but for a Monster Hunter game, it was pretty cinematic. That's not even to say that a lot of these scenes top, let's say, 4U. But, you know, I think the ones in Iceborne at least were definitely getting to that quality. Definitely. And then when Iceborne was announced, and then finally being able to play Iceborne, it was just... It was a wonderful time to be a Monster Hunter fan, because it was the first expansion of 5th gen. For us, it was still like next gen Monster Hunter. Like that's essentially what it felt like for a really long time. Even after we've gotten used to it, it was still kind of surreal sometimes. Like, we're playing Monster Hunter and it looks like this, you know. And I know Monster Hunter Online was a thing for a bit, which was Chinese co-developed Monster Hunter MMO, which didn't live too long. But to be fair, this also looks kind of better too. Now, if you want to talk about the overarching story of World, I will say that it is a bit nonsensical. It's kind of a low-hanging fruit for Monster Hunter at this point. Just, you know, we're colonizing a new region, and we're just, you know, killing everything for the sake of research. Now, I don't necessarily mean killing everything as in we're like mass genocide or something, but definitely I feel like we're like the US Army, right? We go in, we see something that's unknown to us, and we want to beat the fuck out of it, and then probably do some research. But I mean, that's always kind of been Monster Hunter. Stories aren't that deep, which it doesn't need to be. It might overcomplicate things if it were the case. Even with Monster Hunter stories, I mean, those games don't have fantastic stories. They're just told really well and have good presentation. But this game also had incredibly good presentation. If you can see, this scene with Nergigante is pretty awesome. And I could watch these scenes over and over. They're so good. But there is something I do want to say, and I don't think Monster Hunter World was a service. And I know Capcom has stated it wasn't, and that they weren't trying to do that. And some people seem to think that because it had a lot of microtransactions, which were all like, none of it was needed at all. I mean, and the game just had a clear life cycle ahead of it. It's not that much different than how it used to be, except it's all just updates now. And maybe a couple of months more of support before the game's done with, you know? So we had our year and a half of base world. And then after that, we had our year and some change with Iceborne. So it's not that much different to me. I don't really see that as a service. it definitely is a gray area, and that's where Monster Hunter has been at for a long time. At least with the console games, main console games. Sure, you could say whatever you want about the handheld games. Of course, they're going to be on a smaller scale. But for games like Tri, Monster Hunter DOS, Monster Hunter World, or Monster Hunter 1, these games were they were made to be network games, but not MMOs or not services. Just an online action RPG with some MMO-like elements. Kind of like Phantasy Star Online, which is where it was directly inspired from in terms of gameplay progression. So, no, I don't think World was a service, to be honest. And I wouldn't be surprised if Monster Hunter 6 is more like a service. I wouldn't be surprised if they figured, hey, maybe we can do this game as a service thing for Monster Hunter for mainline MH. Maybe. But the way they did handle the content was pretty amazing. The way Alatron came into play, it was pretty awe-inspiring, to be honest. Really awe-inspiring. And the fact that the fight itself was hard as balls, at least at first, it was great. But then we get into the meat and potatoes. When Iceborne was on its way out, we got Fatalis, and let me tell you, it was very climactic. There was no sense of anti-cladicalism. Is that even a word? There's no sense of that in this finale. It felt like a real finale. And to backtrack just a little bit, the fight with Alatron, it was kind of like foreshadowing Fatalis. Like, you guys want hard in these games, we'll give you hard. And there was a DPS check with Alatron, and at first I didn't like it, but the more I did Alatron's fight, the more I realized how genius this was for Monster Hunter. We need more mechanics like this, at least for the big boss fights. Because just going in and unga bungaing like big elder dragons, I don't think it's gonna cut it any much longer, to be honest. But yeah, this whole thing with Fatalis was amazing. The cutscene was also really long, but not in a bad way. It felt like a mini movie that was like opening up to this grand finale for Iceborne, which is essentially what it was. And I'll never forget it. I'll never forget the time I beat Fatalis the first time, because it was hard. It was legit a hard fight. Some would say that Alatron is easier. Some would say that Fatalis is easier than Alatron. To me, I would say that it depends. I would say it depends purely on your playstyle and just how decent you are at the game, right? So for me, I think Alatron's a bit more annoying for me. Just because of, the preparing you need to do for elements. For Fatalis, Fatalis hits really hard. And the second and third phase it's pretty crazy. I had a lot more trouble with Fatalis. A lot more trouble. And one thing I did notice in particular is that a lot of players felt cheated, as if they couldn't finish the game. Now, to be fair, I think this move was incredibly brave of Capcom. They were taking a huge risk, which I think paid off, because the hardcore players, we wanted something harder, and we got something harder in the finale. But the thing is, both Elatrion and Fatalis are essentially post-game content. The main story of Iceborne is already done, so none of this is really required. If you don't want their weapons and armor, you don't have to do this. Granted, if you do want their weapon and armors but you can't do it, I can understand the situation that some of those people were in. It was hard as balls. But these two fights really tested just how good you were at this game, or at least how decent you were at this game. So let's talk about Castle Schrade itself. The fact that the finale involves us going all the way back to the old world to fight Fatalis in this iconic location. Like, for me, I'm a Monster Hunter lore head, and for any game that I'm heavily invested in, I love lore, right? So seeing this place reimagined in world, like, for me, it was amazing. And I thought this place had the perfect look for this fight. It was absolutely amazing. And then Fatalis' theme song was, just hearing that again, was also amazing. It was a great time to be a fan of this game. It really was. At the same time, we were all kind of depressed because it was the end of updates for World. Like, that was it. And it felt kind of bittersweet, right? Because the bitter part was, well, there's no more World. We're not getting anything else. And the sweet part is, well, it went out with a bang. We got Fatalis, and we weren't even supposed to get this from the start. It was because of how we reacted when I think Fatalis showed up at an anniversary event. They decided, well, let's put Fatalis in Iceborne. Let's make Fatalis the finale. I honestly think it was a great choice to end off this game this way. But it makes me wonder what's in store for us in Monster Hunter 6. Or not even that. What's going to happen in the expansion for Rise? Because I'm pretty sure it's getting one at this point. That's just something personally I've been thinking about a lot. And I guess for MH6, or whatever it's going to be called, will it be the same? Like, will the gameplay loop still be the same hub-based game, or will they defy all of our expectations and go open world or something? Like, could you imagine Monster Hunter as an open world game? Do you think that MH at this point is getting kind of stale? Now, personally, I don't. I would still like to see open world Monster Hunter to see how that would work. But if you've been playing the series longer than me, and for me, I started at 3U. So if you've been playing longer, since Gen 1 or 2, I can understand why you probably feel that way. And I know some people who already do feel that way. I can even see it. Some of you don't even have to tell me you feel that way. I feel it. I feel it with how Rise is. People almost don't want to play Monster Hunter anymore. And it took Rise to make people realize that, I guess. It's at this point in time, honestly, it's really weird being an MH fan right now. Like, because we got Rise, we were all excited for that. It fiddled out and died pretty quickly. Well, when I say died, I don't necessarily mean no one's playing it. I mean that a lot of people just aren't playing it. But it's just not popular right now. right? Stories 2 came out, was amazing game. I'll play it again for sure. But, you know, there's only so much you can do to keep people playing with a turn-based RPG, right? At least with the way this game was set up. I don't know. But I do know that this shit was insane. Just seeing Fatalis there, seeing him lick his goddamn lips, like, it was nuts. I'll never forget this. Never. And hey, if you've made it this far in a video, thank you, because I rambled. I think I rambled for about 20 minutes, right? And I didn't want this to be like a super structured video, otherwise it would have been 40 minutes or about an hour. And I don't script my videos, so yeah, I just, you know, talk off the dome, right? So yeah, if you guys enjoyed, consider subbing to the channel, and leave a comment down below. What do you think about MH World?